In modern Christianity, it is often we find the questions, well, especially among newer converts, is this or that behavior okay? Or what does the Bible say about this particular activity? You will also find in the religious world many who are more than willing to answer those questions and tell you exactly how they think you should behave. So then, let's look at where do behaviors come from. You may be well aware that the human mind can be said to work on two levels. There is that which is conscious, that is to say, that which you are aware of at any given moment. Then there is the vast area of unconsciousness. That is all that you are doing that you are unaware of. All of the mental and emotional, so-called internal processes. Now, it is within the unconscious mind that we find a person's beliefs. I mean their real beliefs, not what they think they should believe. You may have noticed when someone is under a lot of stress and the pressure's really on, it's like squeezing a piece of fruit to get the juice out. What's really inside is what comes out. This is due to the fact that when you are under stress, all of your actions are really just reactions and are determined by unconscious programs running. Jesus put it this way, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Beliefs then network together, form values, and from the values comes the motivations, and the motivations lead to behaviors. We see this expressed in the book of Proverbs. Above all, guard your heart, for out of it flows all of the issues of life. And in the ancient world, of course, the heart would be what we call today the mind, your thoughts and feelings. So then, if one wants to have good and moral behavior and be righteous before God, then one would need, of course, godly motivations. So it's not so much as what you do, as much as the why. Well, looking at the Bible, of course, we find many do's and don'ts. There is the law recorded in the Old Testament. So then let's take a look here at the Ten Commandments. If these commands are the behaviors that God wanted of His people, don't lie, cheat, steal, murder, etc., then it stands to reason that these commands would reveal the very nature of God, His motivations. Of course, it comes to us through the literature of the Old Testament, which is in the context of the forming of an ancient Near Eastern nation. So, of course, it's in the form of rules and regulations. So then, someone who has the same motivation or nature of God won't lie, cheat, steal, murder, and so on. Well, of course. So what is this nature one must have in order to behave in accordance to the law? Well, in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus was asked, "Teacher, which of the commandments is the greatest out of all the law?" And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, and with all of your soul, and with all of your intention. This is the first and greatest command. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and all the prophets hang on these two." Or, as the Apostle Paul put it more simply, love is the fulfillment of the law. So if what leads to moral and right behavior is simply obeying the command, "You must love," well, let's go into this a bit. You must love. Well, sure, but we don't. So then how does a non-loving version of me turn myself into a loving version of me? We're talking about changing the nature of a person by that person. This is obviously impossible, because simply, if you are selfish and you try to be unselfish, you're merely doing the actions of unselfishness from a selfish motivation. This is like trying to lift yourself up by pulling at your shoelaces, or trying to touch the tip of this finger with the tip of this finger. So then, to be righteous by keeping commands and obeying rules is an absolute futile notion. This is why religion in practice mainly produces hypocrisy. So then, preaching, you must or you must not, can only produce guilt. So the church, especially if you look at church history at all, has been trying to legislate behaviors. They've merely become an organization of professional marketers of guilt. And this has nothing or little to do with Christianity, the Bible, or the teachings of Jesus for that matter. So then we have the revelation of God through the law, summed up in the command, you must love. Then we have the revelation of God in the person of Jesus Christ. The Apostle Paul put it this way, now a righteousness from God apart from the law has been made known. The faith of Jesus to all who believe. And it is the perfect righteousness of Christ by his faith that is imparted to the believer, and for the forgiveness of sins there is his sacrifice. So the revelation of God through the law brings guilt, and the revelation of God through Jesus Christ brings freedom from guilt. So now you can love with the very nature of God as your own. Christianity is then liberation from guilt and union with God, or in Jesus' words, to be one with God, or to have the nature of God. And there's nothing you can do to get it, and there is nothing you could not do to get it. It is the gift of God to all those who believe. So it can be said that the gospel is not just that Jesus is the Son of God, or of the nature of God, but because of him, you are too. So it is not just a simple matter of what would Jesus do, but it's what do you want to do? What are your beliefs and motivations? What is there inside of you? And to paraphrase St. Augustine, righteous living is to love God and then do what you want. If there are moral absolutes of right and wrong, then of course it would be impossible to be a moral person without the liberty to act on them. So to be moral and good would require freedom from the cage of behavioral absolutes. For those who go around preaching behaviors and adherence to rules and traditions, well, these people have always been around. This is not just a recent phenomenon. Jesus himself had plenty of harsh words for them in his day, and he also warned his disciples about them, saying, they are blind guides, and if a blind man leads a blind man, both will fall into a ditch. But what we often find in the Christian religion are people wanting to be told what to do and how to think. It's not just the new convert. It is a puzzling thing. Such freedom, bought at such a high price, then given freely only to be ignored or traded away for some cheap religious notion. Perhaps this is because there is some comfort in being told how you are to behave and how your beliefs should be expressed. It's like almost a mental atrophy has come over them. You know, like a muscle that isn't exercised grows weak. Maybe it is just a simple intellectual laziness, a kind of lackadaisical ecclesiasticism. Imagine if all the people all over the world that profess to love God were to stop worrying about particular behaviors and instead unleash their imagination and thought of all kinds of new ways of expressing God's nature. That would be something, well, wouldn't it? Here's the question for you. How do you show them the liberty they can have, free of the cage of behavioral absolutes? How to turn someone to a love of wisdom instead of looking for commands, to reason in imaginative thought, to let go instead of clinging on to religious notions. How does one inspire curiosity and a thirst for knowledge instead of giving them a list of do's and don'ts? Or more simply, how does one inspire faith? Well, it's obvious, of course.